Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So if you like my video, please hit the like button. If you have not subscribed and wish to, please hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. So in today's video, I'll be talking about how I went from where I was to where I am, and I got this off of Ember Honey Raven, the Big Fat Witch. So I hope that you get a better idea of who I am as a person and all that. So I'm not going to go into like graphic details, if there is graphic details in my life, because I want this to be a nice clean video and everything. So I was born in 1979. I am a Sagittarius, if people don't know that. Or if you're not gone all the way down to my first video from nearly 5 years ago, you probably do not know that I'm a Sagittarius. And so I'm kind of like this blunt, in your face, I don't give a damn about your feelings or whatnot. And so that's just the type of person I am. So, all the way up to probably about the age of 6, me and my family went to church, minus Stephen. Stephen came along later. I don't really remember that much or hardly at all about me going to church, except for my mother talking about how Brother Nealon, who is, I think, still alive, which is weird, you say, like, whip that kid, and we're not talking about, like, beatings, we're talking about whipping, which is different. Whipping is different than beating, because one will not get you visited by CPS, the other one will. So we packed our bags and we moved from the land of sand spurs. And for people who do not know what a sand spur is, it is a little annoying little defense mechanism in certain kinds of plants that causes you an extreme amount of pain. And my mother used to tell me stories about her brother's wife and how they wrapped their furniture in plastic and wouldn't have let the kids on it. And when they got into it with sand spurs and was crying, the dear old mother would basically beat them. Not whipping people, beating them. So so we moved down to the land of fire ants and flying cockroaches. Yes, flying cockroaches do in fact exist. It's been a long time since I've seen a flying cockroach, but they're real. And also the land of the number one reason why people are late for work. Number 2 is death. So, and if people want to know what I'm talking about, Florida has alligators and crocodiles. And a lot of people like to leave their garage door open, and they crawl underneath your car, and they wait for you to come out so they can literally eat you. That's the big ones. The little ones just want to eat your ankles and your feet. Yeah, that's the big ones that want to eat you. They're also the number one reason why you don't have dogs anymore and why your cat suddenly vanished. So anyways, so my mother became friends with this couple that had this little girl who is now probably about around my age. And they were paralyzed from the waist down, and the only way they could actually go to sleep is if they had a waterbed. And for people that were born after 2000, waterbeds are basically floating pools covered with cloth. This is and basically you cannot jump on as a little kid. They actually had to keep the door closed and locked so that my friend would not jump on the bed. because if she jumps on the bed, she could cause a rip, and it would literally just come out. And it doesn't come out in a little puddle. It goes shh. So, yeah. For those people born before the 2000s, you know what a waterbed is. So it was a really cool item back in the 80s. Everybody wanted a waterbed in the 80s. So my aunt started dating this guy who was skinny as a beanpole, and they were planning on to get married and everything. And then something happened that changed everything, that caused the falling out between my mother and her sister. And that was when I came running into the house, literally shaking like a leaf. And what happened was my aunt's fiance was a pedophile. Enough said on that subject. But I will kind of extend on that by saying that I was the one who actually got him convicted, but he never spent a day in prison for being a child molester. Back then, they did not have a sex offender registry. That requires a computer, and law enforcement officers back in the 80s, they did not have a database, and they did not have computers. They typed everything still on typewriters. They still filed things. I don't even know how they got records from other states, because I don't know how law enforcement back in the 80s did that. But anyways, he broke his terms of his probation, and he went to prison for, I don't know how long he went to prison for. But my friend was emotionally damaged because of the experience, and that's how they knew that my story was true and it actually happened. But that affected me in ways that I never went to a psychiatrist for. So I fell into the world of books. And books became my refuge. They became a place where I could be around people and not be attacked. My aunt always constantly brought up what happened when I was 6. And my mother basically told her to shut her fat mouth. But it did cause a falling out between the two. My grandmother had to pick a side, and she picked my mother's side. And that also caused a falling out between her and her daughter, which was sad. But when you rather believe your creepy fiance over the law, you kind of don't have your priorities straight. And for a little bit, for people who do not know this, which probably you don't, my aunt's husband's brother created Tales from the Crypt, created the Crypt Keeper and the witches and all that type of stuff. So for people that do not know, I am distantly related to the creator of Tales from the Crypt, the comic, not the show. The comic actually went under because of the Comic Code Authority. So just a little bit of historical information, if you guys are Tales from the Crypt fans, that's who created it. The comic, not the show. The show is great. The movies are great, but the comic book, it was good. My favorite was the woman who killed her husband and dumped him in the well, and he came back. I love that one. That one's my favorite. So I fell into the world of books, and I started reading up a lot about Egypt, and I thought it was this magical place where people believed in animal head gods, and I thought they were really cool. And I would read about the Celts and about the Greeks and about the Romans and about I would read fantasy about witches and wizards and all this type of stuff. I really loved Willow, the movie. Um, I still think that his Dark Materials is a really great trilogy. So I was surrounded by books, and my mother, despite her not being big on reading except for the Bible, she supported my going into the world of fantasy because this was how I coped with reality. But I was bullied by. The only time I was not bullied was when I was in kindergarten, which is weird. It seems like by first grade, students kind of pick on your insecurities and they kind of feed on that. They kind of develop into little demonic monsters that they will grow up to be when they become adults, who will end up becoming a bunch of demonic um, they pick on that. And I got bullied by my classmates. Nobody in school liked me except for the teachers and the unpopular kids, the people with physical disabilities and mental disabilities, because I had been raised to treat people with respect and dignity. And when you are taught to treat people like they're human beings, no matter if they're physically or mentally disabled, people that don't have those types of morals, they think that there's something wrong with you because you encompass the qualities that society at large demand or expect people to follow. So I went to live with my aunt. Me and my brother went to live with my aunt. My aunt was abusive. I won't go into details about it. I mean, she did believe in beating. And then what happened was she tried to get custody of me and my brother. By the way, my brother's home, if you want to know. She tried to get custody of both me and my brother, but I wanted to live with my mother, and my brother wanted to live with mom. And so what ended up happening was we ended up living with my mother, and we moved up to St. Louis because she had friends there, and her friends could actually get us an apartment, which was really great. The kicker was my aunt did not want to give up the Social Security checks, so my mother actually had to go to the Social Security Administration and get the checks. I was drawing it from my dad's Social Security because he had been in Vietnam. My mother told me a lot of stories about, he had malaria. He would wake up and have these war memories. She said the Vietnam War was bad. So my father was exposed to Agent Orange by Monsanto. And so for him, he had a lot of psychological issues because of Vietnam. And it turned into this, this whole thing. So she got the checks back, which furtherly divided my mother and her sister because she wanted to keep the money and legally she could not. So I remember we climbed in the car one day. My brother was in his little car seat going, and she took me to a place called Pathways. I had never been to a shop like this before. I didn't even know shops like this existed. And this was a shop for people that were practicing Wicca and witchcraft and things like that. And she allowed me to purchase my very first book on Wicca called To Stir a Silver Cauldron, I think it's, yes, To Stir a Silver Cauldron by Silver Ravenwolf. And I read this, and of course I asked questions about Wicca and about what is it and everything. And the lady was very nice to me and basically told me all about what Wicca was and everything. And I decided that I was going to practice it. And I had gotten one of her earlier books, and it listed all these different traditions of Wicca, but they also listed all these different gods and goddesses. And I saw all these different deities I had read about when I was 6 years old. And I also encountered gods I had never encountered before, like Freya and Zeus and Athena and all these other things. Because it was like when I read about the different cultures of like the Greeks and the Romans, I really didn't read much about their religion. It was more of their society, which shows how narrow my scope was on that. And so I was practicing that for a number of years. And when I was in probably my middle of my 20s, I had noticed that my mother's was having some issues and things like that, so we took her to a psychiatrist, and she was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And to live with somebody with anxiety and depression is to live with a different human being than when you were in your teens. And they actually localized when it began, and this was through her own upbringing, because a lot of people don't realize. Now, it hasn't happened to everyone, but back in the 50s and the 60s and later on, you had a lot of baby boomers that grew up in very religious households, and most of the time, you had families that really clicked, and they ended up having great dynamics. But every once in a while, you would get a couple that was so toxic that they transferred that toxicity to their kids. So, for example, my grandmother was born in 1912. Her mother was full-blooded Cherokee. So she had mental problems from the Trail of Tears and all that type of stuff. And it was her in the Trail of Tears or her parents going through the Trail of Tears, one of the two. But there was that psychological problems, with the government and trying to repress Native American beliefs and language and customs and dress and all that type of stuff. So the psychological issues started back in the 1800s, and it just went right into the 20th century. And my grandmother hated. There's two groups of people that my grandmother hated. Japanese, because of Pearl Harbor, and white people. Now I know what people say, how could she hate white people if she happened to be white? Well, back in the early 1900s, even all the way to the 1960s, there was this racial or this ethnic hatred known as xenophobia, or the fear of the other. And people in the early 1900s were just as racist towards black people as they were against Native Americans. And you actually could not leave the reservation. This is what Mother had told me years ago. So the fact is that she was Native American. She married a white person who had a white-hating child. Yeah. So my grandmother used to be a crack shot with the rifle or the shotgun, and she would fill it with these salt pellets or these salt pellets. And every time that she was called a squaw, she would shoot them in the ass. And being hit with a gun that's full of salt pellets or whatever they call it, yeah, it hurts like I don't know what. You know that episode, that scene Kill Bill where he goes and shoots this woman with salt pellets? Yeah, it's a lot of blood. And the thing was, oh yeah, which woman did you, which woman did you insult today? But it kind of gives you this glimpse into a very nasty aspect of American history, where you had Native Americans who integrated into white European communities that were still treated like they were trash because of their blood. So anyways, so she was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and she went to the Social Security Administration, and normally you're turned down the first time, but something happened, it was fate or whatever, and she was actually approved. So she didn't have to go through an attorney to get the money that was coming to her. So we went to Barnes & Noble, and I'll tell you something about Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble used to be, this is the early 2000s, before Nook came out or Kindle came out, when the idea of e-readers was something that people just couldn't grasp. You could go into a Barnes & Noble and it was 2 stories of books, movies. DVD was still a new thing in the early 2000s. Blu-ray, I don't think Blu-ray came out till like middle part 2000s. I'll ask my brother. But anyways, so you had DVD, and it was nothing but DVD, and you had some cassettes, and you had some CDs. But on the second floor was you had like children's. They had the Circle 3 series that was just wrapping up at the time. And yes, the Circle 3 series. Everybody loves that. It's the only book series that's accurately depicted the religion of Wicca. And so what happened, so me and my mother went to the New Age section, and there must have been at least 100 books on it. It was on either side of the aisle. And you could look at tarot samples and all that type of stuff. Basically, they were offering what the New Age stores were not offering at the time, and that was basically tarot samples and things like that. You could actually touch the card. Note, none of the samples had the death card. None of them had the death card. Just so if you want to know. So anyways, so my mother and me, we picked out like I think 20 books, and we paid for it, and we bought I bought my brother a Xbox 360, and it was a lot of fun. So, so a couple of months later, my mother, despite paying for the books and despite being open-minded and everything like that, she told me that she did not want me to be practicing Wicca and witchcraft in her home, and she talked all about things that she saw that I was going through that I didn't pick up. And I asked my mother, well, why didn't you tell me you didn't want me to do this? And like, oh, well, would you have listened? Point blank, that was a big fat lie. She knew that I was an adult, so she had reached, I think her anxiety and her depression and a couple other things were starting to pop up. Because if she was against Wicca and witchcraft, we would have never gone into pathways in the first place. She would have never gotten her palm read. She would have never gotten any of this stuff done. So it was kind of, well, I'm going to lie about my reasoning because my daughter doesn't have enough intelligence to realize I'm lying. I knew she was lying. So I decided to go looking at other things, and that's how I uncovered heathenism, which has its own issues, and I have mentioned this time and time again. It has issues that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. I discovered Druidry, which I really loved. My mother used to walk in and see me watching videos of druids, which my mother was not really a big fan of me watching those videos. But it wasn't witchcraft, so she couldn't say really anything. So, I tried to stay away from it, and I didn't succeed because I really liked the religion. I liked the idea of being a witch, and my mother used to say, I don't know why anybody would call themselves a witch. I'm like, well, why would people in Islamic country call themselves a freaking Christian? Well, that's not the same. It is exactly the same. So, so I went into Hellenism, I went into Cometicism, I went into heathenism, I went into all these different types of branches of paganism, trying to find something that would fulfill me spiritually like Wicca did. And I would stay on the path for a while, and then I would leave it and go into something else. And it was like there was no magic. There was nothing there. I did like heathenism because it had the satyrs, not satyrs, no, the prof, the it had the like the wise women, and it had Freya whose chariot is drawn by cats. She could do magic, and she was the leader of the Valkyries, and Freya always struck me as this powerful woman that didn't answer to no one. And I really was drawn to that imagery of Freya with her cats. And it took me a very long time, constantly going back into heathenism and constantly looking at Freya and go, wow, I really like this deity. So when my mother, passed away, I was free to explore what I wanted to explore, and that's how I ended up coming back into Wicca and witchcraft and everything. But still, I always had this image of Freya in my mind, and that is why she's currently on my altar along with her brother. So I am happy where I'm at now. I feel like that I have reached a point where I feel like I don't have to answer to anyone. If nobody likes my religion, that's fine. I don't really care. But it took me a lot of ups and downs and sideways and this way and that way, taking care of a sick mother with my brother's help, putting up with her anxiety and depression, putting up with her mood swings. It is very, very hard to take care of somebody with a disability. But back when I was a little girl, I never knew I'd be one of those people that would be taking care of somebody with a disability. But, I also learned something really, really invaluable during that period is, I look at people that are paralyzed from the waist down, especially, this girl's parents. They had a lot of inner strength that I just don't see nowadays. I see a lot of people that get into car accidents and are paralyzed from the waist down, and they give up. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. And it's like the people of the 80s had this fortitude that you just don't see anymore in a lot of people. And I really, I know they're probably deceased by now, but they really, really, really showed me that the people in the people in the disability community who not just fought for the right to be able to enter a business in their wheelchair or have a seeing eye dog or even a pony. There's actually in New York, you can actually, if you're blind, you can actually have a pony if you're allergic to dogs. They're not exactly liked, but law's a law. But I really admire the people that are disabled that they come out and they say, I'm not letting this get to me. My mother allowed her diabetes to kill her because she just didn't have the inner. I'm not saying that she just didn't have the inner fortitude. It's just that she gave up, like, right there. But I have learned a lot in my 40 years that I have been on this planet, on this round globe in the center of the universe, it seems. And, it was difficult to take care of her, but, inner strength is probably the most important thing. So we're where we're at now, and I'm pretty happy. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know it's 30 minutes long, but I hope that you guys better understand me as a person. So until next time, may you be happy, healthy, and most importantly, be safe and held to the gods. Bye.